To perform an authentication, we need to look up the user that wants to do an authentication. Name resolution and group check are important concepts that can be tuned according your taste. The details of a user will be displayed when you select the users. Here you can edit the user, disable the user, delete the user or enable the user. Set or reset the password. Or take a deeper look on assigned Digipass, user info, user attributes, administration privileges. To be a valid user with an Identikey, the enabled Digipass must be checked. You can change its stored static password, local or backend authentication. You can disable and lock the account. In Identikey server, Digipass user accounts are identified using a user ID and a domain, not just a user ID. There are a few settings that influence this process. These are Windows name resolution and simple name resolution. When Digipass user accounts correspond to Windows user accounts, the Windows name resolution feature can be used to support 3 login formats. With ODBC or an embedded database, it is optional whether to use Windows name resolution or not. However, if the Windows name resolution process is enabled and fails, the login is rejected. Therefore, a login with a user ID that does not correspond to a Windows user account will be rejected. With this feature enabled, Windows is used to resolve the NT4 style and user principal name user ID formats. With simple name resolution, if the user@domain format is used for the user ID, the Identikey server will look for a domain record with the name given after the. If the domain is found, the domain part will be stripped from the user ID before the authentication process continues. If it is not found, the user ID will be left as user@domain, and no domain will be identified. In that case, the default domain processing will be used, as described next. The full process of user ID and domain name resolution is illustrated in the following diagram, for the case where Active Directory is the data store. The full process of user ID and domain name resolution is illustrated in the following diagram. Specific Windows groups can be selected for authentication by the Identikey server when all users are Windows accounts. The following group check modes are available. Pass requests for users not in listed groups back to host system. The Identikey server does not handle authentication for users who are not in one of the defined groups. These users are handled by the host system. In effect, this means that they do not need to have Digipass user accounts and they do not need to use a Digipass to log on. As soon as the group check indicates that the user is not to be handled, authentication processing stops and the not handled result is returned. Reject requests for users not in listed groups. The Identikey server rejects authentication immediately for users who are not in one of the defined groups. Use only backend authentication for users not in listed groups. This mode can be used when backend authentication is set up. The Identikey server will just use backend authentication for users who are not in one of the defined groups. The policy user info is displayed here. Dynamic user registration. When the Identikey server receives an authentication request for a user without a Digipass user account, it can check the credentials with the backend authenticator. If the authentication is successful with the backend authenticator, the Identikey server can create a Digipass user account automatically for the user. This process is called Dynamic User Registration, DUR, and can be enabled via the administration web interface. Password Auto-Learn. If Password Auto-Learn is enabled, a user may directly log in with their new static password in front of their OTP. If it does not match the static password stored by the Identikey server, It can be verified with the backend authenticator. If correct, the Identikey server will store the new static password for future use and authenticate the user. Stored password proxy. If stored password proxy is enabled, any changes to a user's password on a backend system need to be communicated to the Identikey server. This can be done using password auto-learn. Windows group check. When the group check is active, users who are in one of the defined groups go through the full authentication process. However, there are a few group check modes that control the outcome for users who are not in one of the groups. The group check mode is defined in the policy. One or more Windows group names must be defined in a group list in the policy. Group membership is checked within the user's own domain only, therefore these groups must exist in each domain where there are users who need to be included in a group. You can edit or delete the policy, or take a deeper look on the other tabs.